Back to Michael Steele, who's been on Bold TV before, and we're excited to have him back. He's a former Republican National Committee chairman, and he's also the host of the Michael Steele podcast. Welcome back, Michael.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, great to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be with you.
Hi, Michael. So far, it seems at least 20 Democrats have announced that they're running for president. So for you, who stands out as the biggest person that could potentially defeat Trump?
Right now, by all my estimations, it's Joe Biden. Joe Biden, I think, brings to the table, and it's already evident, the kind of pressure on Trump that the others don't, quite honestly. Even in terms of how Trump has gone after Biden in the last 24 hours, you can tell that there's a different edge to it. He knows that Trump has the ability to pull those white voters who moved towards him after Obama in the 2016 election back towards Trump, towards Biden. Biden is an everyday guy. He's a guy who rides the Amtrak to work. He's, the guy who walks the neighborhood. And all of his problems notwithstanding, and they are legion, he's had 35, 40 years worth of public record. There is an affinity for him in the body politic. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how his campaign launches and utilizes that, takes advantage of it.
Well,
but
Michael,
also
do you
how
think
Trump
that
responds to it.
Do you think that he can actually escape the Democratic primary? Because it seems to me that the Democratic primary is really driven by what you look like, what your skin tone is, your gender. Yeah. They're more interested in your identity than your ideas. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think Biden could actually win the primary?
Well, it will be tough. It will be tough, but it is doable. It's eminently doable for him. But look, you're right. They've got this gender and race and other based criteria in order to work through their primary process, not the least of which is how progressive you are in this new democratic environment. I think in many respects, though, and you're starting to hear some of the trend lines, and it's reflected in the polls, Carrie, that we've seen, that despite all of that, there is a core well of folks in the Democratic primary process who see the upside of having Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. That's why he's led pretty much in every poll. Yes, a lot of that's name ID, but it's also name ID with baggage. So there's stuff that they know about Joe that they may not necessarily like or have been concerned about. They're willing to look past that to say, who is the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump? And so that's going to be the test of the primary at the end of the day. Yes, I can be the perfect apostle on all things progressive. Give me the list, I'll check every box. I can be the perfect apostle when it comes to the identity politics that you like to play, whether it's my gender or my race or my ethnicity. Give me the box. I'll check the box. But at the end of the day, if none of that beats Donald Trump, what's the point? If the 70-something-year-old white guy standing in the corner is the only one who can do it, you got to look to that corner and go, who's going to put us on the playing field and give us a chance to cross the finish line?
Yeah, so what about the Republican candidate, Governor Bill Weld? Does he have a chance?
No. And I know Bill Weld, and I have an immense amount of respect for him. Worked with him when I was Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, and he was governor up in Massachusetts. And here's the thing. The primary process is a fixed game. It is one of the most fixed of fixed games. You saw that play out in the Democratic primary, how the party put their finger on the scale for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And a lot of that is part and parcel of what goes on. Aside from just putting your finger on the scale, there is something about the power of incumbency. And I think Bill Weld has to overcome that. Right now, Donald Trump enjoys 90% support among Republicans, base Republicans. And that probably among the primary voters would be closer to 100%, meaning every primary voter more than likely is going to line up to vote for the incumbent.
Hasn't the Republican Party basically guaranteed that he can't run? As I understand it, the rules they just adopted?
Yeah, exactly, Carrie. So they've adopted rules going back to the 2016 cycle. Reince Priebus and others manipulated that situation inside the game. Remember how there were concerns about a floor fight and how folks were going to rise up on the floor and put names in their nominations. They want to know what the process was going to be on that. So they changed that. They've also made it even more difficult through getting into the primary and going through that primary.
Wouldn't the argument be that that's sort of what
you?
Wouldn't the argument be that's what you want, because you want your candidate to be tanned, orange, and rested, and you want them to be tanned? Like, I would want the president, and I'm going to vote for him. I plan to vote for him in 2020. I think he's doing some great policies, so I would want. And it's same thing with Barack Obama. I don't think anyone ever expected in 2012 that there would be any sort of primary challenge within the Democratic Party for Barack Obama.
No, but Obama's not Trump, so you didn't have the fractured nature of the Democratic base in 2012 or 2008. The Republican base is fractured. You have Republicans who have left the party over Donald Trump's presidency. You have Republicans who are fighting inside the party. You have Republicans who are going after each other. So you have this roiling battle inside the party itself, which gives rise to the possibility of someone running. My own governor here in Maryland, Governor Larry Hogan, was just in New Hampshire this week at a breakfast event and became the talk of New Hampshire in a very, very short bit of time because he made it very clear, hey, yeah, I'm going to look at a possible 2020 challenge, because he represents a side of the party rather, that under Trump has largely been eviscerated, and he wants to pull back into that fight a little bit more, those values and those ideas. I mean, look, I get where folks are, but we have to be honest about what we're talking about here. Trump is like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat and has upended the way the Democrats are oriented in how they are moving forward. Trump did the same thing in the Republican Party. He's not a Republican, and certainly not a conservative, which has always amazed me with the evangelical conservatives, Christians who sort of say, oh, yeah, the adultery thing, yeah, but I got a Supreme Court nominee. So people are making their own judgments within the party, which is a very different kind of battle than the one we saw in 2016.
So, Michael, would you, given what I'm hearing you say, would you support a Larry Hogan or maybe a Mitt Romney, or would you support a primary challenge to the president?
I have to look hard at that. Larry's my boy, so he and I talked a little bit about that, and I've been very honest about it. It's not a very easy thing to do. It does have a downside potentially to it, in that it can create greater fractures within the party. But I have to tell you, the things that drew me into the GOP are no longer salient. The idea of free markets and a free enterprise system, understanding who our enemies are and who our friends are, and speaking to the higher angels, if you will, in us as a nation, as opposed to preying on the things that divide us. When you refer to my heritage as a shithole, when you blame others for wanting to come to the United States for whatever reason, those things are anathema to where the Republican Party has stood in the past. We've always been the party of assimilation. That's our history. We've always been the party that talked about growing opportunities, not shrinking them. So that's a debate I'd like to see us have as to who we are, what is our true character in this age, and what will it be going forward.
So, Michael, let me ask you, it sounds like essentially what you're saying is both on the Republican side and many people on the Democratic side want to get back to normal, right? And I think that Joe Biden...
Whatever that is, right?
Yeah, and whatever that is, right? And I think that right now, Joe Biden could present normal. He's centrist enough. So could you see many Republicans standing behind Joe Biden if he comes out of the primary just to get back to normal?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it's very much one that is on the table, and it's one of the things that threatens the Trump candidacy for re-election in 2020 is the ability to pull those independent voters, that center-right, center-left, Republican and Democrat, back into this space. Now, people talk about the middle as if it's something god-awful and terrible. But it is largely the space in which the country's operated out of for the last 100 years. And so it's one of those things that I think at the end of the day, voters are going to look at and assess how the candidates best deal with some of these big issues, but also make them feel about the country, how they make them feel about the country, how they make them feel about being an American, what those values are, how they're represented and portrayed around the globe. All of these things have the ability to pull those voters that you talked about away from Trump in a way, despite a good economy, despite Supreme Court appointments.
Michael, are you saying is there a chance that you would support Joe Biden?
Yeah, that would make some news, wouldn't it?
Throw the bone. Come on, Michael.
Yeah, no. Look, they're bridges, and they're caverns. I don't know. I just can't see that. As much as I like Joe, I know Joe and admired him in his public service. There still has to be some philosophical underpinning, some policy that has to be played out for me. And yeah, I'd like, the Supreme Court appointments and the tax cuts, even though I had some issues with the impact it would have really on the middle class, truly, was in the right direction. So I get the policy piece with Trump. It's everything else. You know what it's like with Trump? It's like you raise a kid, right? And the kid's getting straight A's in school, but he's a holy terror on the playground. So, you sit there and go, well, at least he's bringing home straight A's. At least he's giving us what we expect our son to give us. There's a little bit more to it than that, and that's something that I think we all have to evaluate and decide just
so if the election were held,
much of this makes sense.
If the election were held today, who would you vote for?
Depends on who's on the ballot.
Let's just say hypothetically, Joe Biden and President Trump.
Probably do a write-in.
Who would you write in?
I voted for Evan McMullen in 2016, so I'd probably write his name in.
Okay. All right, keeping the dream alive.
Look, for me, this is more than just about policy. This is more than just about getting a box checked and say, oh yeah, I thank you for doing something that you said you were going to do. There's much more to being president than just sitting in the chair and having the title.
I want to challenge you one thing on this, because I think when we say the normal, it should not be normal that a conservative is being assaulted on a college campus for giving a speech, or the professor who's bringing them in. We've normalized that. We've normalized the fact that in Hollywood, if you are a conservative, you are blacklisted. So when we're talking about cultural norms, Trump is the human wrecking ball who is
Trump is
the
doing
cultural
nothing
creep
on any of those. Trump has not changed one iota of what happens. I go on college campuses all the time. And I'm welcome. I teach at Brown University. And so this idea that there's this grand cabal that, every conservative who steps on a college campus is refused access is just BS. And Trump has nothing to do with that. Was before Trump. And look, when I was chairman, I worked with the folks in Hollywood and understand what that community is going through and how that community is emerged and has emerged in a very different space. This isn't 20 years ago where that was truly the case. There are a lot of conservatives who work on movies, television shows, who are producers, directors, who are in leadership roles in these programs. So this idea, I'm not saying that still doesn't happen to some degree, but Trump isn't touching that. Trump is not affecting whether or not you or me or anyone else gets to go on a college campus. So I'm not projecting onto Trump that he's some savior, that his wrecking ball is changing my life at Harvard or Brown or UCLA. That's just BS.
Well,
at the end of the day, what I look at Trump at, what I look at him for is presidential leadership in the Oval Office. When the country's hurting, do you lift us up? When it's time to challenge our adversaries like Russia and North Korea, are you looking for a pal time and a love letter, or are you looking to stand firm on behalf of the ideas and values and principles that we stand for? Those are the things that matter for me, not whether or not a conservative gets to speak on a college campus when it comes to Trump.
Michael, we got to wrap, but I'd love to have you back to continue this conversation, because I went to Harvard and it was incredibly biased, the professors too, not just speakers. But anyway,
all right.
Thanks so much, Michael Steele.
All right.